As a performer, your body is there.
Hi, I'm Mad Kate, and you're listening to Sweat. Sexuality, work, extraction, art, theatrics. Sweat is a series of conversations about performance and performativity of the sexual and sexualized body at work, where work is broadly defined as the labor of survival, the labor of care, creativity, and capital A, art. How exactly do we define our work? And how does that work entangle and circumscribe our sexual identities, our creative lives, and the ways in which we provide care? How do we perform tasks, acts of care, and identities? Anchored in our always already racialized and sexualized bodies, our complex intersectionalities, these conversations are a means of relating through work to each other. I hope they contribute to dialogues which normalize sex work, and all work as deserving of respect, healthy conditions, and a living wage.
What I've loved about taiko, when you really are comfortable with it and you're just playing it, is ego dissolves. It's just no longer there. You're not even there. It's just the thing you're doing and the music. And I'd like to achieve that feeling in my own life for myself.
My guest this month is Kaz Falkenstrom, a poet, drummer, and arts activist whose work has left a lasting impact on Tucson, Arizona's literary and cultural landscape. Kaz has played a vital role in shaping the city's art scene, directing the Tucson Poetry Festival, co-founding Kore Press, and creating spaces for women's voices in publishing and music. In 2002, she co-founded Odaiko Sonora, dedicating much of her life to the art of taiko drumming.
Human history is full of people being oppressed and persecuted and then turning around, the persecutors being persecuted. And I hope we can stop doing that.
Queer Korean-Norwegian transplant from Virginia to Arizona, Kaz shares how the somatic practices of writing and drumming shape creative expression through movement and rhythm. We dive into the complexities of learning another culture's art form, particularly her relationship to taiko as a Korean-American artist, and the fine line between appropriation, lineage, and respect. We also explore the power of silence and stillness, and the balance between creating space for others and stepping forward from oneself. Finally, we reflect on mastery versus obsession, selflessness versus selfishness.
So before taiko drumming, all I did was poetry. I ran the Poetry Festival, and I worked at the Poetry Center. I founded a feminist letterpress, Kore Press. It was mostly just literature. And after I found taiko in 2001, I didn't have time for anything else, because you saw it, it's kind of all-absorbing. You can't just buy the instruments at a music store. And so that was one of the alarming things. Is like, I was like, I want to play taiko, and you have to have the drums. So I had to learn to build the drums. And that's where my 7th grade shop skills came in, and I learned how to build the taiko. So I built enough taiko that we could actually have a group of people play. But, if you have to build the drums, study the music so you can bring it back to teach people, and then run the classes and perform and run the business, you don't really have time to do anything else.
So I wanted to take a quick moment to introduce some of the basic tenets of the podcast. I come from a belief that we are all producers of knowledge. Each of us carry our own unique perspectives and understanding. And it doesn't really matter whether we use academic language or whether we see ourselves as intellectuals. We're all thinking, questioning, and making sense of the world in our own ways. So I try to approach conversations from that perspective, that we have special knowledge about what we do, and especially about our own bodies, how our bodies move through the world, how they're perceived, and how they feel, particularly in our work. So this might be interesting because you do have 2 different practices, and probably more that I don't even know about. But you have this creative writing practice and this taiko practice. And I'm curious what it feels like in your body when you're writing versus what it feels like in your body when you're drumming.
Jumping all over the stage, hitting things with sticks.
I saw you. You're very present. You're very active. It's not just the arms. It's the whole body.
It is the whole body for taiko. Well, I was walking the dog this morning, and that's my, wake up and think thoughts time. And I realized that I was thinking about writing. And I remember the first time I experienced a physical sensation when I read a poem. And it was in high school. And I was alone in the high school library. And I found a book of Edgar Allan Poe's poetry, which I kind of hadn't realized that Poe wrote a lot of poetry. And I read a poem a lot of people know called The Bells. And it was the bells, 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 oh, the tintinnabulation of the bells. And it's this kind of tripping rhythm. And it really is all about different kinds of bells, alarm bells and sweet bells. But by the end of reading it, and I was just reading it silently to myself in these darkened shelves of the library, by the end of the poem, I was actually like, my heart was beating. And I was breathing harder. It was like I had just run or something. And the feeling inside my body was one of such, I guess you could say it's spiritual or religious experience brought on by reading this poem, which, when I look at it now, I would not say this is a great poem. And I wouldn't say that the meaning of it was what thrilled me. It was something about the repetition and the rhythm and what it said about bells in a way, but like if I were to tell you what this poem is about, I'm like, oh, it's about bells. But it encapsulated the experience of bells so beautifully in the language that I actually had a physical sensation, like I had just done 100 push-ups or something. And that was a revelation to me when I realized that writing could actually produce or cause or inspire physical sensations that way. It's probably why I got into poetry. And the rhythm factor was really important for me with poems. And because I'm half Korean, if a rhythm gets established, I usually try to break it. I don't know if you've ever seen Korean music or heard Korean music, but it can be very cacophonous. There'll be a rhythm set up, and then they'll just boom, ba-doom, doom, and they break the rhythm all the time, which is why I like sort of thinking of it as language. But I honestly don't feel inclined to play Korean rhythms on the drum, because what happened when I found the drums is that all of that sensation that poetry could produce inside my body, sort of emotionally, psychologically, I all of a sudden was able to express with my entire body. So my arms and my legs became capillaries or, veins where the blood would be rushing through when I was reading poetry, and I would feel that excited sensation. But instead of just feeling it inside my body and holding it there, through taiko, I could find that I could express it outside my body for other people in a way that writing poems themselves didn't do. Writing the poems for me, writing words on paper or typing words into a computer is not a physical expression. I mean, it's not much of one anyway. You're dragging a pencil tip or a pen tip across the page, and there's a sensation there. And I might feel inside a sense of completion, or that I got something down that was meaningful and that sounded right. But in terms of waving my arms or jumping around or yelling, none of that happens really with poetry. Even in a poetry reading, although I guess I stopped giving poetry readings kind of before the slam era. So I never really did performative poetry. I mostly just read the poems. And I found that when I got to drumming, the way I put it was it used all of me better. Drumming allowed me to express through all of my body parts the kind of elation that I felt when I experienced beautiful art. That usually was just inside. But all of a sudden with taiko, I was able to embody that feeling and communicate it physically to other people. I hope.
Yes, when you first compose a poem, there's the pencil drawing on the page. But what happens in the body when you first feel that thing that you want to express? What's happening for you there?
Yeah. Well, I find that for me, poems can come from a couple different places. Sometimes, for instance, I'll be walking the dog, and a poem can just fall into me almost fully formed. Right? That I suddenly have this poem inside me, and I just have to get to the pencil and the paper or the computer and write it down. It's like a gift. And then there's the other kind of poem where I have set myself kind of a task or an exercise, or I feel like I need to write a poem about a thing. And I'll sit down and just start writing and see what comes out. That's more typical than the ones that come fully formed, like some gods pouring it into my cup. I love those. And they take very little tweaking afterwards. They usually really do come out almost exactly the way they're going to end up. The other kind feels more like a labor.
But does that mean you have a practice? That means that you're like, I'm going to sit down between.
Yeah, it's a discipline, right? Like you have to say, today I'm going to write a poem.
Do you create that space in the day? Is it that kind of discipline? Or is it like that you set up hours in the day that you actually write? Or
I wish I could say I were that disciplined. But since I'm not first and foremost a writer these days, I don't usually make that time. I have started journaling again this past year, which I had kind of taken a break from. I was a ardent journaler all through my 20s and 30s, and later I just sort of fell away from it. I think partly because taiko did fulfill so much of my need for expression that I often, like when I got home, I just wanted to be quiet and take in thoughts and data. You know, it's one thing about taiko is when you're doing it, you can't be anywhere else. So you can't have thoughts about the laundry or whatever because you'll mess up. Mm-hmm. With poetry, you can stop, put the pen down, and do the laundry or whatever. But in the middle of a taiko song, you just have to be in it all the time. And that's what I love about it, because I'm a little ADHD. So when I can find a practice that where I'm impervious to distraction, I love that. It feels meditative. You know, if I were going to be pursuing a career as a writer, I would have to hunker down and make the time happen. But I've also dedicated this year to a little bit more discipline, because I often use obsession instead of discipline. Like I get obsessed with something, I need to make it happen, and it looks like discipline, but it's not. It's just really hard work.
Or shorter lived.
Completely like hyper-focused hard work. I really would like to get an element of discipline back in my life.
So your writing, you were saying, is somehow arrhythmic, or you play with rhythms, but then you break them, and you were tying this into your Korean heritage?
Yeah, taiko is incredibly, in our group, because we're not like on ensemble, which is kind of like the Kronos quartet of taiko. They do all sorts of really experimental, interesting work because they're all incredible musicians. But usually a taiko group is comprised of people who maybe have never played an instrument. And this might be the first time they've ever even been on a team. So I like to describe taiko as a martial arts team sport using percussion. And, you know, there's elements of song and dance that you saw that are part of the tradition of taiko. But most people, when they start taiko, are just there to hit the drums. And the rhythms are really simple, and we do them in unison. So it's incredibly regimented feeling in a way, which is quite opposite from how I express myself through poetry, which I explained, you know, because of Korean music. Japanese music is really different than Korean. And there is this community-minded aspect to taiko that is almost antithetical to writing poetry, because you can't do it without other people. Whereas with poetry, you totally don't need anyone else there. And so there's a social quality to taiko that the order really helps. The order and the discipline, the community-mindedness really help us pull off something like the concert you see, because there's a hierarchy. And the songs themselves are very orderly, and the group is hierarchical, which is extremely efficient. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Does it give you an opportunity to be creative? What is that process between, you know, you come to the group and let's play this? Is it an existing rhythm? Is it something that you can yourself suggest? Is there opportunity for creation there?
Yeah, I mean, there's different levels, of course. When I'm teaching my students, I teach them really simple songs that I want them to succeed at. You know, hopefully they will feel like they can, they're challenged enough that they're engaged, but that they're succeeding enough that they'll want to continue. So those songs are they're scripted. And as people play longer, we open up possibilities for them to do soloing. And when you get to the higher level, it's kind of like a jazz improv. A lot of times it's a structured improv. So you'll have a song structure, and there'll be a refrain, and then there'll be solo sequences where each individual player can express themselves or feel terrified.
Right, like on the spot.
Right,
kind of, yeah,
right.
Sure.
And there's nothing like feeling on the spot to really get people to pull something out that they didn't know they had before. And with writing the songs, it's kind of like a poem in that oftentimes there'll be this rhythm, like a phrase in poetry, but in taiko there might be this rhythm that you just hear over and over again. It's going through your head all day long, and it's just a matter of getting to a drum and recording it. But then the discipline has to kick in, because now we're not just talking about everybody doing the same beats anymore like you are when you're a beginner in taiko. Everybody's pretty much playing the same beats, and one person is playing the high-pitched drum to keep the time. They're kind of like the conductor, but everyone's playing the same thing. When you get up into higher levels, you have polyrhythms and you have interlocking rhythms. You have different parts. So you may have a rhythm in your head, like a phrase of poetry, but at that point, to make a song of it, like poetry, you have to come up with a kind of structure. But unlike poetry, you have to come up with complementary parts that other people will play that will make interesting dialogue within the rhythms. So it's very creative. And we were at the concert on Sunday, so the opening of the All Souls finale portion that began with the woman playing shamisen, the song that came in right after that was a composition I wrote, and it's called Pulling Down Clouds, which is a reference to the Tohono O'odham, the native peoples here in the desert. They will use the phrase in autumn, pulling down clouds. So when you look at the sky and the rain's coming and the clouds are starting, it literally looks like the clouds are being pulled down to the earth here in the desert because the way the rain falls during the monsoons. So that was a reference to where I live, knowing that the O'odham people have lived here long before I have, and paying homage, hopefully, to that phrase, which is so perfect. The rains are really important here. And so that song also has this quality of reverence towards the rain that comes, sweeps through, also tears our roofs off, can be very destructive to these monsoons. So it's this complicated homage to an incredible force of nature and a phenomenon that happens here where I live. So, to me, that song it's a beautiful expression of how I feel about living here. And unlike poetry, I need, I don't know how many people, 5 other people to make that song happen. So that's where the kind of teamwork and the discipline come in with taiko.
Beautiful. I've been thinking a lot about the times in my life that I've spent doing kind of solo. I used to be a swimmer. So that time. And it was before there was kind of, I guess they have underwater headphones now. I didn't have that,
Yeah.
It's just swimming and being with myself.
Yeah.
Versus team sports, where you really have to work together, which I did later in rowing. And it is a kind of unison. Still, there's that place that you kind of go on your own.
Yeah. Well, I think we need that. I think we often walk around feeling like the world is way too much for us. There's so much stimulus. And when I walk, I never wear headphones. When I'm home, I never play music.
Wow.
I love the silence in my life, and I cherish it. And, I think it's interesting that you went from swimming to rowing, because I think we find that the feeling of that silent meditation happens when we're in unison with other people. There's something about the unison quality that creates this harmony that feels a lot like silence to me. Mm-hmm. If you watch, people always love watching birds flock, right? They make those beautiful shapes, and every individual is a little different, but altogether they make this one unity. And there's something about experiencing that unity that's really similar for me about sitting in silence with all of the parts of myself and experiencing the unity of myself, I suppose. It feels like that unity of watching many things do the same thing. Mm-hmm. And I think humans like that.
I share that. It's funny. That's been something, again, I've really kind of been meditating on, because I'm very networked, and I raise a kid with 2 other people, and, I have a lot of what might be called like a relational anarchy in my life, and trying to like network in new ways.
The detangle.
Building new queer family and,
right. That's the
queer
other thing.
chosen family.
Forging our families.
Right.
And all this.
But sometimes I also find myself feeling lonely.
Yeah.
In that. Yeah. Like in the sense that I still feel alone. I'm in unison with others in a sense, but I also feel alone. And I don't know, I'm kind of curious, does queerness come into that? Does a misfit in some ways come into that? Like what is queerness when working in unison with other different bodies?
A team of misfits.
Right.
Well, and I actually feel very much like the people that I've chosen, my chosen family in this world is a team of misfits. I was just having a conversation with my friend Cantrell. She's my bestie. And she's been doing music. She was probably the first woman out singing rock and roll in Tucson back in the 60s, 70s. There just weren't many women in bands back then. It's hard to imagine now, but she has always just felt, because of her experiences, sort of outside the norm. And I think most of my friends that I get along with best feel somehow outside the norm. And being queer is clearly being outside the quote-unquote norm, although it's not as abnormal as most people think, would like it to be. I find the whole idea of, dichotomy is that it's black or white is ridiculous. That's the premise of my life. But I think...
You mean between being straight and gay, or
any black and white, I think is ridiculous. I live my life in shades of gray. And even my friend who feels othered by her experience of being a woman in rock and roll and going to New York and living a pretty hard life out there, I don't think it's as unusual to experience these things that make us feel othered. I don't think it's as unusual as people think it is. I think everybody has experiences that take them outside the norm, and I think everyone feels lonely no matter what they do. I think it was Margaret Mead who said, there's places in the heart that invite as we may, no one will ever enter. And even if we spend our whole lives expressing ourselves or connecting with other people, there's still going to be those moments when we are just so utterly alone. I think a lot of people try to crush that feeling. They try to hide it or cover it up with more noise or more activity or more people. And I think it takes special kinds of people to put that in perspective and allow themselves to feel those moments of incredible loneliness, aloneness/loneliness. They're not the same. I love feeling alone. I love it. It doesn't happen that often. And I know other people have it, and I know people like you relish that. Like, what would we do without our alone time?
Oh, yeah.
It's not that we're necessarily introverts. It's just that I think every human being, to help be healthy, should sit with themselves for some period of time. And if they're avoiding it, I think that's a problem.
Yeah, it's very easy to avoid at this point. So I do a lot of field recordings, and I play with sound, and then I manipulate sound. And one of the things I think about when I do that is the context of where the sound is sounding and like what that sound is kind of being held by. So I do a lot of contextual mapping of sound. So it helps me to kind of think about questions like, where am I? Who lives here? What's the political context of this space? What's the historical context of this space? And so when you bring the practice of taiko here,
oh wow,
what does it mean? What's the community holding that, and how does it feel to have others hold it who aren't connected to it by their heritage? Draw that out for me a little.
Oh, so many things. I mean, I'm East Asian, so in a way, I get a pass to do taiko. Right. And there's a lot of my friends. Here we're in Tucson, there's hardly any Asian people. So, of course, we're going to have a group that's predominantly not Asian, mostly of European white ancestry. And there is discussion of appropriation and whether people feel like imposters. And to me, appropriation happens when there's a power differential. So, like if we take a Hopi symbol and slap it on a mug, that to me feels very much like appropriation because A, the Hopi people are not getting any money back from your mug. B, I don't think there's an intense connection or any study of the Hopi culture that kind of gives someone permission to slap that symbol on a mug. Now, if you're Hopi and you are engaged in cultural practices, yeah, you can use the symbol. And again, this is not cut and dry. It's really, there's like this gradient of appropriation versus, I guess on one end, and on the other end, a responsible, honorable training in someone else's tradition. And bringing taiko here, I will admit, I had a very American attitude about it, which is I just wanted to do it. And so I was going to make it happen. There was no group here. I had studied with a gentleman who fell ill, and I no longer had access to his training or his drums. So I had to, do that thing, make it happen. I had to find the resources and do that thing. And that's so American, I'm finding, that we feel like we have the passion and the inspiration and we'll find the resources, and then we're just going to get her done. no matter what. And I found that over the years, when I look back on some of the things I did in the first few years, it's a little embarrassing. I didn't even know how to tie my obi correctly, the belt on the costume. So there was a lot of missteps and a lack of insight into what I was doing in terms of immersing myself in another culture's art form. And I think we have to forgive ourselves for that to some extent. If we continue just blindly use someone else's stuff to get our thing done, then that's a kind of blindness and a laziness that I don't think earns you kind of some freedom to explore someone else's culture. I feel like if you apply yourself diligently to training with people who know the art form, who do the art form, who commit to learning as best you can the true roots of a practice, and you go back to that country and you find teachers who have done it their whole lives, and you invite them here and you pay them, and you instill those values into the people you're teaching, and you make them aware that at every moment they're involved in a tradition that came long before them, and that there are demands and requirements to that. And also then I'll talk about the land. So bringing taiko, there we have, this idea of, what is appropriation, what is not appropriation, how can I do this art form respectfully, and how can I make my non-Asian, non-Japanese students feel like they're earnestly and honestly engaging in this art form. But then you bring it to this border area here, near Mexico, and there's already this extraordinary culture crash. The history of Tucson is, one of constant rotating between Native American issues, white people's issues, and Mexican folks' issues, because we were Mexico. But before that, we were O'odham land, we were Pueblo land, and we were Hohokam land. So there's really like this, an awareness here of the history and a history of rotating cultures, I'll call it, that I didn't have when I grew up in Virginia. Out here, there's these designated reservations. You can be on O'odham land, you can be on Navajo land, you can be on Hopi land, and those people are there. Even in town, there is a Yaqui, Pascua Yaqui reservation that's a few blocks within the town of Tucson, and when you walk on it, you're stepping onto Yaqui land. So for me, there's a constant awareness that I'm practicing taiko in a place that has all of these presences, these cultures that are present and practices that are present. And being on the border is also something that I've been very aware of, especially through writing. Writing on a borderland gives you an awareness that you may not have in Kansas.
What is that borderland for you? How does that operate within you?
Oh, that's a good question. When I first moved here, the border, literal border between Mexico and Arizona was much more permeable. I used to go down in Nogales, and it was no big deal. You'd show your ID, you'd come back, and it wasn't militarized. And, Mexican families would come up here, shop at the Kmart, get some donuts, and then go back to Mexico. And it was kind of lovely. People wanted to live where they were, and they benefited from being next to the other country. And since then, it has become such a war zone.
I think it was in 96 that it really became militarized, as far as what I remember, that it really became fortified.
Yeah, because it happened in the 90s. And at that point, it became so much more difficult. And so border became more like barrier, where before it was an exchange. And I guess, for myself, because I am bicultural, I'm Norwegian and Korean, in a way, there's a reflection there that, I haven't chosen which culture I mostly want to express, but there's been more opportunity to express the Asian part. And it's also more clearly, I am more Asian looking than I am Norwegian looking, unless you just look at my name, which is very Norwegian or German. So for me, my outward expression has always been one of, I could say double blood, but Asian, that's what people see. Or other darkness, I've been called everything. I'm nebulously ethnic is how I put it. So I've been called Indian, I've been called Chinese, I've been called Italian, I've been called, you name it. So I get to be whatever wherever I go, I can be something different. But trying to get those parts of myself to interact, to be a permeable, complementary boundary has been important, because I don't just want to be one thing, because I'm not. I don't want to just be white, which I could. I mean, I passed for white a lot. I went to a mostly white high school, and I used my whiteness in many situations to help other people, because I can be a Karen. I've done that because if I have to pull that card, I will be an asshole for somebody else. But also inside, there's a huge amount of racism that, has come out over years, where I see no one is immune to the inherent racism in this country. And whenever I come up against that, it's shocking to me. And I don't even spend any time feeling bad. I just want to fix it, right? So, and I won't go into the story, it might be too long, but I've had a couple of encounters where I realized I did something that was so incredibly racist. And it came out of complete ignorance. And my only response is, I have to do better.
Yeah.
I can't do that. I can't be that ignorant. I have to do better than that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, I grew up in Northern Virginia, and at a time that I feel like there was so much internalized racism I was swimming in and socialized in, internalized homophobia, transphobia, ableism, it goes on and on. It took me getting out of it to even start to see it.
Well, there's a reason I don't live in Northern Virginia, because I would never have discovered those things about myself if I had stayed there. It's like a fish in its element, right?
Yeah.
You're not even aware of the water.
Yeah.
I had to get out and look at it consciously to realize what blindnesses I needed to attack in myself.
How has it felt for you over the years since when you said you referred to it as making mistakes in the beginning of getting into taiko to now? How does it feel in your own body? I actually did go to South Korea with my project, and the artist that asked us to go wanted us to sing in Korean. So
it's so hard.
It was very hard, and she taught us to sing the lyrics that we wrote together for an album called Critical Magic that we performed there. And
I gotta hear this.
Yeah, I have to share it with you. But one thing was definitely the relationship of Koreans to Japan.
Yeah,
have you embodied that through your mother, through your heritage, through your relationship to Korea, vis-a-vis your relationship to Japan or to taiko itself as an art form?
So much in that. The question, I started off thinking about one thing, and now I'm thinking about something completely different. So my mother was raised during the Japanese occupation in Korea. And so weirdly, I am as Japanese as I am Korean, because she was made to speak Japanese, and she had a good voice. And when she was 8 or 9 years old, the Japanese occupiers would trot her out to sing Japanese folk songs on the radio to show, the happy Korean folks.
Wow.
How happy they were under the occupation. And so there's this real
that literally gives me chills.
I mean, the first time I went home and I told my mom I was studying taiko, which is, really Japanese, and I said my sensei, she told me that a shiver went down her spine, like frisson, but not a good one. It was like she had a visceral reaction to hearing me use the Japanese language in her home. And, it was a pretty brutal occupation. But when you think about it, in comparison to that, think about how Japanese were interned here in this state, in Arizona, in their own country. And I think I came up with this phrase the persecuted du jour. Human history is full of people being oppressed and persecuted and then turning around the persecutors being persecuted. And it's what we do. I hope we can stop doing that, but we seem to still do that. And I wondered why I was so drawn to a Japanese art form as opposed to a Korean art form. Because I actually find, like I said, Korean music is rather cacophonous, and I find their drumming style, it doesn't appeal to me, but Japanese drumming does. And part of it is because it took taiko for me to realize how Japanese I am, that I'm almost more Japanese than Korean, because my mother is almost more Japanese than Korean. She doesn't understand the new Korea and the new Koreans.
Wow.
Because she was raised during this time that was, all my cousins spoke German. We all studied German. Because during the Japanese occupation, there was this sense of order and an existential secular humanism that pervaded all of the Koreans that were being raised during that time, which later really became buried under waves of Christianity that took over South Korea. But my uncles and aunts and mom were born during that period before the huge Christian wave. And their intellectual approach to a lot of things is very Japanese and very German. So, I don't know how else to say it. There's an orderliness and a way to do things. It's not just slapdash, and it's not extreme. It can be extreme, but it's extreme within a certain order. So, I'm generalizing terribly, but there's something in alignment there, and it's not just because the Koreans make the noise, like the Germans do. There's something else there, and even the language, when you look at Japanese and German, the grammar, there's something sort of similar about it with the verbs on the end.
Well, it's very rhythmic also.
Yeah, and it's very rhythmic. So Japanese, I was laughing when you said you had to learn Korean, because Korean is so hard to pronounce. I'm constantly pronouncing it wrong, and my mother gives me crap about it. Japanese is way more easy to pronounce for me, and I find it much more, I can wrap my brain around Japanese culture, brain and heart, and the language more than I can Korean. Korean feels more foreign to me, even though I'm ethnically half Korean. I feel more attuned to the Japanese culture. So I constantly felt like at the beginning when I was playing taiko, I was doing some stuff wrong. And then I learned that's just being around Japanese people. You just constantly feel like you're doing something wrong all the time because the societal pressure to conform and the expectations to do the right thing by everyone is really great. So,
is this when you were studying in Japan?
Yeah, every time I go to Japan or I'm with a lot of Japanese people, even in Hawaii, I feel like I'm doing stuff wrong all the time.
That's like me in Germany, so.
Right? Yeah, I think it's like, wow, you can't go back. Because there's things I don't understand. It's an incredibly high context culture, and people don't need to use a lot of words to know what to do the right thing. It's expected, and they all understand each other in a way that Americans don't. We're a really low context society. We have to talk all the time and explain things to people all the time because there's so many different kinds of people here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when I think about like trying my obi wrong or something at the beginning, I've stopped feeling bad about it, partly because I'm so used to feeling bad about, like I've done something wrong. It's actually this interesting, insulating thing to know that you're going to feel like you did something wrong, but you really haven't. So like I just think about the past me, historic me with my obi tied wrong. And I just sort of feel compassion for that little Karen who was trying, didn't get it right, and did it better later. So go girl.
What is taiko when it's here? Do you let go of some of that? I don't really want to say rigidity, but I guess that's what, are there less rules?
Oh, yeah.
Does it shift? Does it become something else when it's in Tucson? When it's played also by white people in Tucson, for example?
Yeah, it's not the same as in Hawaii. In Hawaii, it's mostly people who are ethnically Japanese, and they have created a culture within each dojo or, studio that feels very Japanese, but also Hawaiian, because the partying is not like in Japan. The food, there's food in Japan, but there's a celebratory nature to the Japanese Hawaiian groups, kind of a joy that I haven't experienced with the Japanese groups in Japan. Yeah, you have to adapt to where you're at. And you can't make a 70-year-old white person suddenly understand what it's like to be part of a Japanese taiko group. They're going to bring themselves. And I don't like to make a lot of rules. I feel like rules exist because people push boundaries. People do things that are not okay. And so we have to make a rule about it. Like, don't drive on the left-hand side of the street here. Because somebody did it and then something bad happened. And so we had to make a rule. That's kind of how I feel about rules. I just want people to have understandings and there to be guidelines. I want them to decide to do the right thing themselves rather than make them adhere to my dictates. So I've tried to run the dojo like that with understandings rather than rules, because many martial arts groups, some taiko groups are as strict as martial arts groups, like San Francisco Taiko Dojo was very strict. And if you didn't do something, the sensei got mad at you, he might say, give me 50 push-ups or something. And on the other end of the spectrum are some of these Buddhist groups that really just get together almost as a social thing and a heritage connecting thing, and they eat and they drink and they play a little taiko and there's lots of joy and they're laughing and they don't care if it's really rigid. There's every dojo along that spectrum. And mine falls somewhere in between. I like to apply some of the Japanese etiquette because I feel like when people bow, like coming into the dojo, it's good for everybody, no matter what culture they are, to leave the outside world outside and come into a practice space with your baggage at the door so that you can actually practice the art form and have that focus. I like the bow when we start the class because, again, it changes. It's that moment of transition from what we were doing before to what we're going to do next. I also like the senpai kohai order, which is senior students to newer students, because then you know who to look to for guidance. So we circle up with senior students first and then circling around to the newer students. And that way you look to the right and you know somebody's had a little more experience. It's very practical. We don't adhere to any of the punitive stuff. People don't call me sensei unless they want to. It's up to them. We don't punish people. We don't make people do push-ups. Everybody is required or expected to help with cleaning, but we also tell them what to do so that we don't have to wait for them to jump in, because many people here don't jump in for whatever reason. They don't know what to do or they don't feel like they're allowed to. Or maybe they're just one of those people who's really unaware that there's work going on and they should probably help. That happens, right? So we try to, make a list of jobs that people can apply themselves to, right? That sort of clarity, which is very Western and not very East Asian. So it's kind of a mix. And then just being out here in the desert where it's really friggin' hot, there's a dance form here called Waila. It's W-A-I-L-A. It comes from baile, from the Spanish dance, but they call it Waila. And it's also called chicken scratch, because what's happened is all of these European dance forms came through immigrants and conquerors and whatever to this region, and the Otham people adapted some of them for desert festivals. And so because it's so hot and you don't want to exert yourself too much, you're not going to jump around. You're not going to polka like in The King and I. You're not going to go jumping around a room, getting air and moving really far. You're going to polka kind of in one place without too much energy because it's hot and dry. So Waila developed because of the environment that the European dances, schottisches and mazurkas, those were brought to the desert and adapted for people who live in the desert. And so in a certain way, taiko, certainly in Tucson, is adapted to desert lifestyle. We're a rather low-impact group. And I think you saw the concert on Sunday, so I can say, like, even the Phoenix group is much more, fierce and loud, I'll say. And our group has a kind of laid-back, sort of behind the beat, slightly
it's playful,
different vibe.
You came across as playful to me.
Oh, good. Well, that's good. I mean, we're playful, but there's also this way that we don't do, like if you go to San Francisco Taiko Dojo and they are all out all the time pounding, and we just don't have the people and we don't want to do that in a triple-digit heat. So we do have a particular style, and it is playful. Just like with any musical instrument, once you get enough of the technique and familiarity with the instruments or the art form, then you can get out of your own way enough to have fun with it, right? And that's my only job as a teacher of taiko, is to get my students to get out of their own way. And whether that's physically, mentally, or psychologically, if I can get people, any particular player, to stop judging themselves and just let themselves play, that's the sign. That's what I would call a success. That they're in the song, they're just being the song, they're playing the song, and for a moment, they're not thinking, they're just being the music. And that's when the play comes out, right? But you have to put in the hours.
Well, one of the things you had talked about maybe bringing in was this question around where you begin and end, where your work begins and ends. I often ask people first what they consider to be all the different kinds of work they do. So where does that begin and end for you?
Yeah. Well, and I will say that like what my work is has been something I've thought about because, sometimes I can say I'm a Jacqueline of all trades and master of none, in that I was a good poet and I wrote some very fine poems, and I got some published, and there was a part of me that was never going to be a master of that. And part of it is I'm not willing to live that life and put that work in. As much as I loved poems, I think I didn't want to be a master poet. Also, I've never mastered an instrument.
You don't consider yourself a master of taiko?
No. No, I've only started feeling in the last, I've been playing for 24 years now. And it's only in the last maybe decade, less, 8 years, that I felt like I've gotten out of my way enough to actually just be like playing it. And I'm only just playing it. I'm certainly not a master. There are still people who play way better than I do, or what I would say when I mean better is that they're more fully themselves playing than I have achieved. And then there are those that, let's just face it, there are some people touched by the gods. And for whatever reason, like Tiffany Tamarabuchi, who's my teacher, I can't learn in this lifetime the thing that she has when she plays, which is simply, it's an unspeakable power and perfection and connection. I'll never learn that, and that's okay. I'm fine with that. I am now playing the taiko that I hoped I could be playing, and that feels good. And I could be better still, I know, so I'm going to keep working at it. And it's going to change, because as I get older, there'll be things that I cannot physically do. Like, miyake is a style where you really get down low and you're weaving back and forth like on your knees. And after a certain age, it's not something your body can do. And so I'm okay with that too. I will funnel my energy into the things that will allow me to feel most capable when it comes to playing taiko. And I think I will keep playing till I die. I'll keep writing till I die. What I am a master of is creating spaces and connections for the things I think should happen in this world to happen. So, I founded a press that when I felt like Tucson needed a feminist letterpress, because, every town needs one of those. That was sarcastic. I felt like we needed a feminist press, and it happened to be a letterpress. And so I created it. I came here knowing I wanted to start a artist cooperative like I did in Richmond, Virginia, create safe spaces for people to create art that maybe was not mainstream. I knew I wanted to create a physical space where people could gather and do art and create community, which is rhythm industry. And I am really good at connecting people so that they can share resources and increase their capacity. So if I have an art form, it is creating spaces and vehicles for people to do their work.
So important.
Doing that now for 40-some years, I realized I have been avoiding myself in a certain way, because it's really easy for me to go out and produce an event and not sit down and practice my shamisen or my violin, my own music. And I realized that by even creating a taiko group, I created the need for accountability. Like, I couldn't just let myself slide, because all of a sudden this group was running me. The building was running me. These events are running me. And I want, in this new chapter of my life, to not have things run me. I want to recognize my singularity and make myself do my work. So I need to practice my violin, and I need to practice my shamisen, which is that Japanese lute. I need to do some drills so that I'm better at taiko, and I need to keep my physical self in good shape, up to snuff for all that. I think I trust that if I make myself better, I will be of more service. If I can gain my own mastery, I'll be more useful in this world. And it makes me think of the word ego in a way. I often thought that I'm kind of suppressing my ego, but also suppressing your ego is a form of ego. If you constantly try to push attention away from yourself, that is a weird form of ego, that like you're so aware of yourself, not drawing attention.
Yeah.
It's so weird. But lately I realized that by always being in the background, always being the instigator, I've often joked that like Sauron, I drive my forces before me. I'm in the back playing the little drum. That's another kind of ego. It's, selfless means there's no self, right? If you're selfless, it means less the self. You don't have a self. I don't know that I trust people who immediately lead with their selflessness, that they are there to serve, because I also know the servant is the master. And in all of the things that I've created in service to other people's art forms and their talents, I'm totally the master of those worlds, So added on to the idea of being a master of creating spaces and connecting people. When you do that, you are both the servant and you end up being the master, because if you want to be a jerk, you can withhold those things, or you can make rules that alienate people. And it's really good to check in now and then and make sure you're doing stuff for the right reason. What I've loved about taiko, when you really are comfortable with it and you're just playing it, is ego dissolves. It's just no longer there. You're not even there. It's just the thing you're doing and the music. And I'd like to achieve that feeling in my own life for myself. My ego has dissolved, like I'm invisible. Oh my God, there's this great quote by a poet, Odysseus Letus, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I don't remember exactly what it is, but he says, anything that I've learned in life about gaining my own transparency. I'm going to find the quote because it's really beautiful. God, help me. Where is that Odysseus Letus quote? All right, well, I guess I'll just try to paraphrase it. What he says is, he says, in essence, like, and he uses the phrase, to earn my own transparency, which I loved. So it's sort of like whatever he's achieved in his life in terms of being truthful or communicating something honestly, which is, in a way, he said, to earn my own transparency. He says that he owes it to poetry. And I would just replace that with the art one is engaged in. So you earn your transparency by dedicating and engaging yourself with this art form. And it ends with to be kite for the sky and sky for the kite, which I thought is a beautiful image for like, you are both. You know, I've spent a lot of time creating sky for a kite to fly in and other people's kites, and it's time for me to be the kite because both are required.
You just heard from Kaz Falkenstrom, a 1.5 generation Korean-Norwegian American raised in Virginia and transplanted to the desert Southwest in the late 80s. Her career in the arts includes teaching, performing, and arts administration. She holds a BS in architectural design from the University of Virginia and an MFA in creative writing and poetry from the University of Arizona. You can learn more about her in the show notes. The Odysseus Letus quote that Kaz wanted to share is, "Whatever I was able to acquire in my life by way of acts visible to all, that is, to win my own transparency, I owe to a kind of special courage poetry gave me, to be wind for the kite and kite for the wind, even when the sky is missing." I'm Mad Kate, and you've been listening to Sweat, a series of conversations about performance and performativity of the sexual and sexualized body in work. The theme music was composed by me and features the voice of performer and actress Lori Baldwin. Sweat airs every second Tuesday of the month at 13 hours Central European Time on Collaboradio. Free Radio's Berlin-Brandenburg, broadcasting on 88.4 FM in Berlin, 90.7 FM in Potsdam, and streaming online at fr-bb.org. Afterwards, it's available for streaming wherever you get your podcasts. Sweat is an unpaid labor of love. If you have the means to financially support the show, you'll find a link to my Patreon in the show notes. Your support is warmly appreciated. Thanks so much, and until next time.